Hi friends, today we're going to discuss about the worst thing that happened across the world. And what is the worst thing that happens across the world? The discrimination practices. The discrimination practices are done in many forms, like caste system and racism, etc. At first, let me discuss about the caste system that followed in India. And let me see how did the caste system came about. Manusmriti, widely regarded to be the most important and authoritative book on Hindu law and dating back to at least 1000 years before the Christ was born, acknowledges and justifies the caste system as the basis of order and regularity of the society. The caste system divides Hindus into four main categories: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. Many believe that the group originated from Brahma, the Hindu god of creation. At the top of the hierarchy were the Brahmins, who were the mainly teachers and the intellectuals and are believed to come from the Brahma's head. And then the Kshatriyas, the warriors and the rulers, supposedly from his arms. The third slot went to the Vaishyas, or the traders who were created from his thighs. At the bottom of the heap were the Sudras, who came from the Brahma's feet and did all the menial jobs. The main castes were further divided into about 3000 castes and 25,000 subcastes, each based on their specific occupation. Outside of the Hindu caste system, where the untouchables are placed. And let me see how does the caste system works. For the centuries, the caste has detected almost every aspect of Hindu religious and the social life, with each group occupying a specific place in the complex hierarchy. Rural communities have long been arranged on the basis of castes. The upper and the lower castes almost always lived in the segregated colonies. The water wells were not shared. Brahmins would not accept the food or drink from the Sudras, and one could not marry the other from the other caste. Many leaders are protesting against the caste system. But up to now, the worst things are getting happen.
Now, listen to this. So-called upper caste people in a Karnataka village drained out a water tank to purify it with, I'm quoting here, cow urine after a Dalit woman allegedly drank water from the tap.
சாதிய மோதல் போக்கு காரணமாக நாங்குநேரியில் வீடு புகுந்து பட்டியலின பள்ளி மாணவரையும் அவரது தங்கையையும் சரமாரியாக வெட்டிய சக மாணவர்கள் 4 பேர் மற்றும் இடைநின்ற மாணவர்கள் 2 பேர் கைது செய்யப்பட்டுள்ளனர். இதுபோன்ற சாதிய மோதல்கள் நிலவும் பள்ளிகளை கண்டறிந்து போலீஸ் கண்காணிப்பை தீவிரப்படுத்த மாவட்ட ஆட்சியர் கார்த்திகேயன் உத்தரவிட்டுள்ளார்.
Draupadi Amman temple near Melpadi in Villapuram district was sealed by officials after villagers from one community, one group, were not being allowed inside by the dominant caste groups.
हमारी बराबरी पे कैसे बैठ जाएंगे?
छुआछूत चली रहो अब तक
उन्हें खवाए देता है, हम उन्हें यहाँ खाता नहीं.
हम लोग नीचे कौम के, वो लोग ऊंची कौम के हैं, तो उन लोगों के घर में हम लोग कैसे जा सकते हैं?
छुआछूत मानते हैं ना, बच्चे भी बड़े भी सब लोग मानते हैं.
Despite of these obstacles, however, such as B.R. Ambedkar, who authored the Indian Constitution, and K.R. Narayanan, who became the nation's president, have risen to hold prestigious position in the country. And the historians though say that until the 18th century, the formal distinction of caste were of limited importance to the Indians. Social identities were more flexible and people could move easily from one caste to another. The new research shows that the hard boundaries were set by the British colonial rulers who made the caste India's defining social future when they used census to simplify the system, primarily to create single society with a common law that could be easily governed. The independent Indian Constitution banned the discrimination on the basis of caste, and in attempt to correct the historical injustices and provide a level playing field to the traditionally disadvantaged, and authorities announced the quotas in government jobs and educational institutions for the scheduled castes and tribes. In 1989, quotas were extended to include a grouping called OBC, other backward classes, which fall between the traditional upper castes and the lowest. In recent decades, with the spread of secular education and the growing urbanization, the influence of caste has somewhat declined, especially in the cities where different castes live side by side, and the intercaste marriages are becoming common. In certain southern states and in northern states of Bihar, many people begin to use just one name after social reform movements. Despite the changes though, caste identities remain strong, and the last name or almost always indicates the which caste the person belongs to. And some of them say that the caste system would have disappeared by now if the fires were not regularly fanned by the politicians. At the election time, many caste groups still vote as a bloc and are wooed by politicians looking for electoral gains. As a result, what was originally meant to be a temporary affirmative action plan to improve the lot of unprivileged groups has now become a vote grabbing exercise for many politicians. And let me discuss about the discrimination practices that happens across the world.
This strip in Cape Town, South Africa, divides the beachside community of Strand from the township of Nomzamo. They're only a few meters apart, but the people on each side live very different lives. Strand has backyards and driveways. Nomzamo is much more dense, and the people here have fewer basic services. Less piped water, less internet access, and Nomzamo is majority black, while the area across the line is majority white. If we use dots on a map to represent race, you can see how stark that divide is. If we zoom out to the whole city, we can see it's actually everywhere. And this is the case across much of South Africa. The color of your skin here often determines where you live. It also determines your quality of life.
Africa is the place where the racial discrimination are getting happen in n numbers. Ethnic Pygmy populations in Central Africa suffers from racial discrimination from Bantu peoples. Pygmies and Bantus differ physically and genetically due to the long-lasting evolutionary segregation until the Bantu expansion brought them back into close contact. Pygmies have been targeted from slavery by Bantu populations continuing into the modern age. They are frequently ostracized from participation into the wider society in the various African countries that they live in and are seen as untouchables. Racially motivated attacks occur on Pygmies, including the cannibalization. In Niger, October 2006, Niger announced that it would deport to Chad the Difa Arabs. Arabs living in the Difa region of the eastern Niger. Their population numbered about 150,000. While the government was rounding up Arabs in the preparation of deportation, 2 girls died. Reportedly, after failing the government forces and 3 women suffered miscarriages, Niger's government eventually suspended their controversial decision to deport the Arabs. In Niger, while the practice of slavery was outlawed in 2003, a study has found that more than 8 lakh people are still slaves, almost 8% of the people. Descent-based slavery, where the generations of the same family are born into bondage, is traditionally practiced by at least 4 of Niger's 8 ethnic groups. The slaver masters are mostly from the lighter-skinned nomadic tribes. And the war was the main source of supply of slaves, although many were brought at slave markets run mostly by the indigenous peoples. And next, let me see about the Somalia.
The hidden history of Somali Bantu. To summarize, a community that used to live in southern Somalia was named Somali Bantu. Throughout their history, Somali Bantus faced discrimination from the people of Somalia, so did they cope with it? This article talks about the real history of Somali Bantus, their appearance, their lifestyle, and their lives among Somalis. Before the Civil War, they led very respectable and decent lives, but the Somali Civil War changed this. The Civil War of the 1990s was used as a pretext to steal their land and property. During the war, many Bantus were beaten and murdered. They were treated like animals, and their rights were violated. The women were raped and even killed if they showed any resistance. The Bantus were scared of Somalis. And that's why they didn't stand up to them. The people of Somalia had taken everything from them.
Ethnic Somalis and populations of Bantu stock are genetically divergent. The Somali Bantu ethnic minority face significant unfair treatments in Somali society due to their differing physical appearance and ancestry from the Cushitic origin majority of Somalia. The marginalization of Somali Bantu community is primarily based on the ethnical factors, unlike the marginalization of Marhiban and other Somali origin minorities, which is primarily based on their status as a social constructed caste. Racially motivated attacks on Somali Bantus have occurred. Journalists who bring attention to the discrimination against the Somali Bantus have suffered from the death threats. In the Sudan, black African captives in the civil war were often enslaved. According to the CBS News, slaves have been sold for $50. In September 2000, the US State Department alleged that the Sudanese government's support to the slavery and its continued military action, which has resulted in the numerous deaths. The United States government Sudan's Peace Act of October 21, 2002 accused Sudan of genocide in an ongoing civil war, which was cost more than 20 lakh lives and has displaced more than 40 lakh people since the war started in 1983. During the Second Sudanese Civil War, people were taken into slavery. Estimates of abductions ranges from 14,000 to 2 lakh. And the Sudanese Civil War are getting happened until now.
On April 15, people in Sudan woke up to the sounds of explosions, artillery shells and airstrikes. Two army generals who came to power in a 2019 coup and shared it for 4 years decided to oust one another. They said it was the only way to achieve a better future for the country. But many believe it's a personal power struggle.
Since the beginning of the mutiny led by the so-called Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, our armed forces took up the full responsibility to crush this treacherous plot and the groups behind it.
Al-Burhan's behind the failure of the political process. He's a criminal and we'll bring him to justice.
And next, let me discuss about Zimbabwe. The racism in Zimbabwe first started during the colonial era in the 19th century, when immigrating white settlers started to racially discriminate against the black people in the region. White settlers held full citizenship rights as well as the other significant economic and legal advantages over indigenous African people. By 2000, as the ZANU-PF government grew politically isolated, it increasingly criticized the white population segregations and racism and began to encourage violent farm invasions against the white people, which drove condemnation from the international community. Zimbabwe today continues to be fractured by intimacy along racial lines. And finally, friends, we are all human beings. Human beings are all equal. There is no discrimination between the human beings. And tell me about these discriminations that happens across the world. And if you like this video, subscribe to our channel.